I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to tell a story like this, but here we are. My name's Ryan, I'm 31, and I've been with my girlfriend, Megan, for almost 5 years. We met in college, moved in together right after graduation, and built a life that, from the outside, probably looked picture perfect. She worked as an executive assistant for a marketing firm, and I was in IT, working remote most days. We had our little routines, morning coffee together, her rushing out the door in heels, me sitting down at my desk with my headset and second monitor. We talked about getting married, even started looking at engagement rings together. Everything seemed fine, until it wasn't. It started small, as these things always do. She began staying later at work, saying they were in the middle of a big campaign launch, and her boss, Greg, needed her to help organize late meetings. I trusted her at first. I mean, she was ambitious, and Greg was married with kids. There was no reason to think otherwise. But then she started acting distant. She'd come home exhausted, sometimes shower immediately and fall asleep without saying much. She became glued to her phone, smiling at texts she didn't show me. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was paranoid, but the pit in my stomach wouldn't go away. Then one Friday night, she told me she had to work late again. I was supposed to go out with some friends, but something in me told me to stay home. Around 8 p.m., I texted her, no answer. An hour passed. Still nothing. I decided to drive to her office, half expecting to feel guilty for doubting her. When I got there, the parking lot was almost empty except for a few cars, and I spotted Greg's black BMW parked near the back. My heart was pounding, but I told myself they were just finishing work. I walked up quietly, peered through the office window, and that's when everything shattered. There they were. Megan was sitting on Greg's desk, her shirt half undone, and he was standing between her legs, kissing her like they'd done it 100 times before. My stomach dropped. I froze there for what felt like minutes before quietly backing away. I didn't even confront them. I couldn't. I drove home in complete silence, gripping the steering wheel so tight my hands went numb. That night, she came home around midnight, smelling like perfume and wine, pretending everything was normal. She kissed me goodnight like nothing happened. The next morning, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I asked her straight out if she was cheating on me. She laughed it off at first, called me paranoid, said I was being insecure because she was finally succeeding at her job. I didn't say a word. I just showed her the picture I took through the window. Her face went pale instantly. She stammered, said it was a mistake, that she didn't know what came over her, that she loved me. I wanted to believe her, but the image of them burned in my head. She begged me not to tell anyone, not to ruin her career. I didn't yell. I just told her to pack her stuff and leave. She cried the whole time, saying Greg's wife could never find out. That hit me hard. She wasn't even thinking about me, just him. When she left, I sat on the floor of our apartment, surrounded by silence, wondering how someone I loved so much could betray me like that. Over the next week, she tried calling, texting, even showing up at my door. I ignored her. I blocked her number eventually. I focused on work, but the image of that night replayed in my head every time I closed my eyes. Then one afternoon, about a month later, I got a message from an unknown number. It was Greg's wife. Her name was Laura. She said she found my number from Megan's email contacts and asked if she could talk. My heart started racing again. I called her back. She sounded calm, too calm. She said she had suspected Greg was cheating for a while, and when she confronted him, he admitted it. With Megan. He told her it had been going on for months. She thanked me for confirming her suspicions. I didn't know what to say. She then told me she was filing for divorce. I felt bad for her, even though I didn't owe her anything. Before hanging up, she told me one last thing that made my stomach twist. Megan had still been seeing Greg after we broke up. Apparently, they thought they could make it work. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Months went by. I started dating again slowly, trying to rebuild my life. But then, out of nowhere, I ran into Megan at a coffee shop near downtown. She looked different, tired. Her hair was shorter, and she seemed older somehow. She smiled awkwardly and asked how I'd been. I kept it polite. Then she dropped the bomb. She told me Greg's wife had actually gone through with the divorce, and Greg lost custody of his kids for a while. The scandal at work got out, and Megan had been fired when the HR department found out about their affair. She said Greg promised he'd leave his wife for her, but once the divorce finalized, he needed space and cut her off. She was jobless, living with her sister, and trying to figure things out. I didn't feel sorry for her. She made her choices. I just nodded and said I hope she found what she was looking for. She looked like she wanted to say more, but I walked away. That should have been the end of it, but somehow, it wasn't. 2 weeks later, I got a Facebook message from Greg himself. The message came late at night. I was scrolling through my phone, half asleep, when I saw the notification, Greg Sanders. I hadn't heard that name in months. At first, I thought it was some kind of spam or a cruel joke, but when I opened it, it was him. Hey man, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I think we should talk. My first reaction was anger. What could he possibly have to say to me? He'd blown up my relationship, ruined his marriage, and walked away from it all like nothing happened. But curiosity got the better of me. I didn't reply right away. The next morning, he messaged again. It's about Megan. I think you'll want to hear this. That line hooked me. Against my better judgment, I told him to text me what he wanted to say. He insisted on meeting in person, said it was complicated. I agreed, mostly because I wanted to look him in the eye and understand what kind of man could do what he did. We met at a quiet diner on the edge of town. When I walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked like hell, unkempt hair, dark circles, a man completely drained. He stood when he saw me, offered a hand. I didn't shake it. We sat down, and he sighed like he'd been carrying a ton of weight. He started talking fast, like he needed to get it all out. You probably hate me. You should. I ruined everything. But I need you to know it's not what you think. I wanted to laugh in his face, but I let him talk. He said after his wife filed for divorce, his company forced him to step down temporarily because of unprofessional conduct. He lost most of his clients, his house, and apparently, Megan had turned on him when things got bad. She blackmailed me, he said quietly, looking down at his coffee. I blinked. What do you mean? He said Megan had started threatening to expose certain internal documents from the firm that she had no business accessing, claiming she'd release them if he didn't keep supporting her financially. According to him, she'd copied private correspondence, financial data, and even client contracts while working as his assistant. I didn't know if I believed him, but he showed me a few texts, screenshots from her, demanding money in exchange for silence. It didn't make sense. Megan always wanted to be respected, to move up in her career, but this? It felt like something out of a bad movie. He said he'd paid her a few times to keep her quiet, but now she'd disappeared, and he was worried she was going to leak everything publicly. I sat there trying to process it all. Was she really capable of that? Then again, after what she did to me, I wasn't sure anymore. He asked if I'd heard from her recently. I told him about the coffee shop run-in, how she'd said she was struggling. He looked genuinely panicked when I mentioned that. He said she'd been calling his ex-wife, leaving messages, saying she deserved the life Laura took from her. That sounded insane. I left the diner feeling sick. The story didn't add up, but the fear in his eyes seemed real. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Against my better judgment, I decided to check up on Megan, not to get involved, just to make sure she wasn't doing something stupid. I texted her sister, who I'd met a couple of times back when Megan and I were together. She told me Megan had been acting weird lately, paranoid, convinced that Greg and his ex were plotting against her. She'd been drinking heavily, sleeping all day, and barely leaving the house. Something in me felt pity. Not love, just pity for the mess she'd made of her life. Her sister said Megan still talked about me sometimes, like I was the one who got away. That hurt in a strange way. A few days later, I got another message, this time from Laura, Greg's ex-wife. It simply said, Greg's in the hospital. Call me. My heart skipped. When I reached her, she told me Greg had been attacked in his driveway. No witnesses, but his phone and wallet were untouched. He'd suffered a concussion and some bruised ribs, but he was going to be okay. The cops thought it was random, maybe a mugging gone wrong, but Laura said Greg was convinced it was Megan. He told them she'd shown up at his office earlier that day, screaming at him in the parking lot. She wanted money again, apparently, and when he refused, she lost it. I didn't know what to think anymore. Was Megan actually dangerous? Or was Greg trying to paint himself as the victim again? Either way, it felt like the fallout from their affair was spiraling out of control. That night, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, I heard her voice. Megan. She was crying, her words slurred. She said she didn't know what to do, that everything was falling apart, that Greg had it coming. I froze. I asked her if she'd heard him, but she didn't answer directly. She said, "He took everything from me, Ryan. Everything. I just wanted him to feel it too." Then the line went dead. I tried calling back, but she didn't pick up. The next morning, I filed a report with the police. I didn't know what else to do. They said they'd look into it, but without proof, there wasn't much they could do. I told them about the texts Greg had shown me, and they took note. Days passed, and I heard nothing. Then, about a week later, I got another call, this time from a detective. They'd found Megan's car abandoned near a lake just outside the city. No sign of her. Her purse was inside, along with her phone, which had been wiped clean. Completely factory reset. It felt like a punch to the gut. I didn't know if she'd run away or something worse had happened. Greg was released from the hospital soon after and went off the radar. Laura stopped answering my calls. I told myself I was done with all of it. But one night, about a month later, I came home from work and found an envelope taped to my door. Inside was a single USB drive. No note, no explanation. When I plugged it into my laptop, there was one video file labeled for Ryan. For a long minute, I just stared at the screen, my hand frozen on the mouse. A video labeled for Ryan sitting in a plain white folder. It felt like a trap, like something out of a nightmare. Still, I double-clicked. The screen went black for a few seconds before the video started. The shaky image showed Megan sitting on a bed in what looked like a cheap motel room. Her eyes were red and swollen, makeup smeared, hair tangled. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. The camera was propped against something because her hands were free, fidgeting nervously in her lap. When she spoke, her voice cracked. "Ryan, if you're watching this, it means I'm gone. I don't know where else to turn, and I know you probably hate me, but you deserve to know the truth." My chest tightened. She took a long breath and continued. "I never meant for things to get this far. When Greg and I started, it wasn't supposed to mean anything. He told me he was miserable in his marriage, that he wanted to help me move up in the company. I believed him. He made me feel important, like I finally mattered. But everything he promised was a lie." Her voice grew sharper, angrier. "After you found out, after he got caught, he turned on me. He made me the scapegoat. Said I seduced him, said I violated company policy. I lost everything, my job, my reputation, even my friends. And when I begged him to tell the truth, he laughed. Said I was nothing more than a mistake he wanted to forget." She looked straight into the camera now, eyes hollow. "So, yeah, I took some files. Not because I wanted money, but because I wanted leverage. I wanted him to feel the panic I felt, but he fought back harder than I expected. He said he'd ruin me if I didn't hand everything over. That's when I realized he wasn't afraid. He was dangerous." She leaned forward, whispering, "He's not who he says he is, Ryan. Greg's been laundering money through the company for years. Fake clients, fake contracts, it's all there. I found proof. That's why he wanted to shut me up. He said if I went public, he'd make me disappear. And I think he meant it." She glanced toward the door like she heard something, then looked back at the camera. "If anything happens to me, don't believe whatever story they tell you. He has people covering for him. Don't trust the police. Don't trust Laura either. She's not innocent. She knew about it. She helped him." Her eyes filled with tears again. "I wish I could undo everything, Ryan. You didn't deserve what I did to you. You were the only one who ever really cared about me. I'm sorry. I just wanted you to know the truth before it's too late." Then the video ended abruptly, the screen freezing on her face before going black. My hands were shaking. I replayed it twice to make sure I hadn't imagined it. Every word sounded desperate, but there was a strange clarity in her voice, like she knew she didn't have much time left. I copied the video to an external drive and went straight to the police with it. The detective who'd handled her missing person case, a guy named Holt, watched it carefully. He didn't say much, just took notes and promised to follow up. But a few days later, when I called for an update. They told me the video had been logged as evidence and was now part of an ongoing investigation. That sounded like a polite way of saying don't ask questions. I couldn't shake the feeling something was off. 2 weeks passed. No news about Megan. No word from Greg or Laura. Then one evening, I got home to find my apartment door slightly open. My heart jumped into my throat. I stepped inside cautiously, every sound amplified. The place looked normal, nothing missing, nothing out of place, until I noticed my laptop open on the table. It had been shut when I left that morning. On the screen was a single message in a plain text document. Stop digging. You're next. I froze. The words blurred as adrenaline kicked in. I called the cops immediately, but by the time they arrived, the file was gone. Completely deleted. There was no sign of forced entry, no fingerprints. The officer suggested it could be a prank or maybe even malware. I knew better. Someone had been inside. That night, I didn't sleep. Every creak, every car outside made my pulse spike. The next morning, I packed a bag and went to stay with my brother for a while. From there, I started looking into Greg on my own. If Megan was telling the truth, there had to be something. I dug through old news articles, company press releases, LinkedIn profiles, anything I could find. And that's when I stumbled on something strange. Greg wasn't just suspended. He'd quietly resigned from his firm 2 months ago, right after the attack. The company had also been hit with a federal audit around the same time. Coincidence? Maybe. But when I tried to look up the case online, half the pages had been scrubbed or led to 404 not found. Someone didn't want that information public. Then I got an email from an anonymous sender with no subject line. Inside was a single image. Megan again, same motel room, different day. Her face was bruised, eyes hollow. The caption read, "You should have left it alone." I sat there staring at the screen, cold sweat dripping down my neck. Whoever sent that knew where to find me and wanted me scared. It was working. I forwarded the image to Detective Holt. He told me to stop responding to unverified sources and let them handle it. But I could tell he didn't believe the story about Greg's corruption. He thought it was just another messy affair gone wrong. That night, I drove to the motel from the video. It wasn't far, cheap, isolated, near the highway. The clerk didn't remember her name but recognized her picture instantly. "Yeah," he said. "She was here a few weeks ago. Left in a rush. Some guy came looking for her later, said she forgot something." When I asked what he looked like, the clerk just shrugged. Business type. Suit. Expensive watch. My stomach dropped. I thanked him and left, but as I got in my car, I noticed a black SUV parked across the street. The same one I'd seen near my building a few nights earlier. Its headlights flicked on when I started the engine. I didn't wait. I drove straight to the police station, convinced I was being followed. When I told them, they said they'd check the traffic cameras. But the next morning, when I called back, they claimed there was no footage from that area due to maintenance. At that point, I knew something bigger was happening. Megan wasn't just gone, she'd been silenced. And whoever was behind it wanted me quiet too. That's when I decided to go public. I uploaded the video to an encrypted drive, wrote everything I knew, and sent copies to 3 different people I trusted. If anything happened to me, I wanted the truth to survive. A week later, a local news site reported that Greg had left town for personal reasons. But I didn't believe it. I knew it wasn't over. After that news article dropped, I felt the walls closing in. It was like every time I got closer to understanding what really happened, the truth slipped further away. I barely slept, living on caffeine and paranoia. My brother started worrying about me, said I was obsessing over ghosts, but he didn't see the things I saw. Anonymous calls with silence on the other end, cars parked outside my apartment for hours, strange clicks on my phone line whenever I tried to call Detective Holt. Someone was watching me. I decided to reach out to Laura again, Greg's ex-wife. She was the only one left who might know something. I found her new number through a mutual acquaintance and called. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was cold, tired, like she'd aged a decade in a few months. "Ryan, you shouldn't be calling me," she said before I even explained why. I told her about the USB video, about Megan's disappearance, about the threats. She went quiet for a long moment before whispering, "You need to drop this. You don't understand what you're dealing with." I asked her if Megan had been telling the truth about Greg's money laundering, but she hung up without answering. That silence said more than words. 2 days later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name typed neatly on the envelope. Inside was a printed page with a single sentence. She wasn't lying. That was it. No signature, no clues. My hands were shaking as I read it over and over. If Megan really had evidence of Greg's crimes, it meant someone out there still had those files. And they wanted me to know. I didn't go to the police this time. I didn't trust them anymore. Instead, I went back through Megan's old social media, her emails, even her cloud backups I'd helped her set up years ago. She used to rely on me for tech stuff, and I still remembered her passwords. Most of it had been wiped clean, but buried in one of her old drafts folders was a link to a private drive. It required a password, and I had no clue what it was. I tried everything I could think of, her birthday, her cat's name, Greg's initials, but nothing worked. I almost gave up, until I remembered something from our college days. Megan used to say her favorite word was tomorrow. She believed every mistake could be fixed tomorrow. I typed it in. The drive opened. Inside were dozens of files, financial reports, invoices, spreadsheets, all from Greg's company. And right there, in a folder named Proof, were screenshots of wire transfers to offshore accounts under fake client names. Millions of dollars. This wasn't some petty office scandal. It was organized fraud. My pulse was racing. I downloaded everything onto an external hard drive and backed it up twice. I didn't know what to do next. If I turned it in, Greg's people might come after me. If I kept it, I was holding the most dangerous evidence of my life. That night, I left the drive locked in a safety deposit box and tried to clear my head. But peace didn't last long. Around midnight, someone started pounding on my apartment door. Loud, deliberate knocks. I froze, not daring to move. It went on for a full minute, then stopped. When I finally looked through the peephole, the hallway was empty, but a small envelope lay on the floor. Inside was a photo. It was me, taken earlier that day as I left the bank. My blood ran cold. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Whoever this was, they were tracking me in real time. The next morning, I packed up and drove to a cabin my friend owned 2 hours out of town. No cell service, no internet, just isolation. I needed space to think. I spent days there replaying everything: the affair, the lies, the video, the threats. I kept wondering if Megan was still alive somewhere, or if I was chasing the memory of someone long gone. Then, on the 4th night, I heard a car outside. My stomach dropped. I looked through the window and saw headlights cutting through the trees. I grabbed my phone, no signal. The car door slammed. Footsteps approached the cabin. I backed away from the door, heart hammering. Then came a voice, female, shaky, almost pleading. "Ryan, it's me. Please open the door." It was Megan's voice. For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating. I slowly opened the door, and there she was, pale, thinner, terrified. Her eyes darted around like she expected someone to be behind her. I pulled her inside. She looked half-starved, clothes torn, dirt on her hands. "They're after me," she whispered. "Greg's people. They know I sent you the video." I tried to calm her down, but she was trembling so hard I thought she'd collapse. She said she'd been hiding for weeks, moving from motel to motel, trying to get out of town. When she saw the news about Greg resigning, she thought he was running too. But when she went to his house to confront him, she found it empty, completely cleared out. He's gone, Ryan. But they're not. They're cleaning up everything. She said she saw 2 men following her near the lake, the same night her car was found abandoned. They chased her into the woods, and she barely escaped. I didn't know what to believe anymore, but her fear was real. I asked about the files, if she still had them, and she said yes, but that she sent copies to someone who could protect her. Before I could ask who, she froze, eyes widening at the sound of tires on gravel outside. "They found me," she whispered. I told her to stay quiet and grabbed a flashlight, peeking out the window. A dark SUV was parked halfway down the road, lights off. 2 silhouettes moved near the trees. I told her to hide and grabbed my phone to dial 911, but there was no signal. A loud bang echoed outside, a car door slamming shut. My hands were shaking as I looked back at her. She was gone. The back door was wide open. I ran outside, calling her name, but the woods were silent. Then I heard it, a scream, sharp and distant, swallowed by the trees. I sprinted toward the sound, tripping through branches and mud, until I reached the clearing. Her phone was on the ground, screen cracked, still glowing. But she was gone again. The SUV was gone too. I stood there in the darkness, chest heaving, realizing I might never see her again. When the police finally arrived the next morning after a call from my brother, they searched the area but found nothing. No tracks, no sign of struggle, no Megan. It was like she'd vanished all over again. Detective Holt showed up later, warning me to stop interfering. He said if I kept poking around, I'd end up like her. That night, I went back to the bank and checked on the safety deposit box. The drive was gone. When I saw the empty box, I knew the nightmare wasn't over. It had just changed shape. The clerk swore no one had accessed it except me, but the timestamp in the logbook said otherwise. Someone had been there 2 days earlier using an ID under my name. The surveillance footage? Accidentally deleted. I walked out of that bank feeling like a ghost in my own life, like someone was rewriting my story while I was still living it. I didn't go home. I drove for hours, aimlessly, until I ended up in another city. I checked into a motel under a fake name, ditched my phone, and bought a burner one from a gas station. For the first time in months, I felt almost invisible, but only almost. I couldn't shake the sense that I was being followed. Every car behind me felt too close. Every stranger's glance lasted a second too long. I spent days replaying everything in my head. The affair, Greg's downfall, Megan's confession, her disappearance. The threads all led back to the same place, his company. So I decided to go there myself. It was reckless, I know, but fear had turned into something else, obsession. The firm had rebranded under a new name after the audit, but I found the same address listed in a business registry. I drove there early one morning. The glass building looked sleek and sterile, like nothing had ever gone wrong inside. I walked in pretending to be a client. The receptionist smiled, asked who I was there to see. I said, Mr. Sanders. She frowned and said, I'm sorry, sir. There's no one here by that name. I thanked her and left, but as I walked away, I noticed a security guard watching me closely, speaking into his earpiece. I kept walking, turned the corner, and broke into a jog until I reached my car. By the time I looked in the mirror, the guard was outside, scanning the parking lot. I drove off fast. That night, I got an email from an encrypted address. No text, just a video attachment. Against my better judgment, I opened it. It was security footage, me, standing in the lobby of Greg's company that morning. Someone was recording from a different angle than the cameras in plain sight. The clip ended with a still frame of me leaving, followed by a text overlay, "You were warned." My stomach twisted. I deleted it immediately, but the damage was done. They knew where I'd been. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my motel phone ringing. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got me again. It was Laura. Her voice was different, calm but distant, like she'd rehearsed what she was about to say. "It's over, Ryan," she said. "You need to move on." I asked her what she meant, and she replied, "Greg's gone. You'll never find him. Neither will they." I demanded to know who they were, but she only sighed. "You think you're the first person to dig too deep? Let it go before you end up like Megan." My throat went dry. What happened to her? I whispered. Laura was silent for a long moment before saying, "Some things don't need answers." Then she hung up. I sat there for hours, staring at the wall, trying to make sense of it. If Greg was really gone, maybe that explained why his company was scrubbing everything. But if Laura knew more, why call me now? And if Megan was dead, why not just say it? That night, I decided to take one last step. I uploaded every piece of evidence I still had, the screenshots, Megan's video, the emails, and sent them anonymously to a journalist who'd once covered corporate corruption in our city. Then I packed up and left town. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. For months, I drifted from place to place, cheap rentals, quiet towns, new names. I thought I'd finally escaped the mess until one morning, about half a year later, I saw a familiar face on the news. It was Greg. Or at least, it looked like him. The anchor said the name was Richard Sanders, a businessman found dead in an apartment in Miami. Cause of death: overdose. But the photo, same eyes, same scar on the chin, it was him. The report called him a reclusive investor who'd lived under an alias for nearly a year. I sat there frozen. They said he'd been under investigation for fraud and possible ties to money laundering. But the case was closed due to insufficient evidence. And then, like clockwork, the story disappeared from every online platform within hours. I tried to look it up again later that night. Nothing. It was like the article had never existed. A few days after that, I received one final email from the same encrypted address as before. It contained just 2 words: "You're free." That was it. No attachments, no threats, no explanation. Just those words. I don't know who sent it. Maybe Laura, maybe someone else who decided I'd served my purpose. But the strange thing is, after that, everything stopped. No more cars outside, no calls, no envelopes. It was as if someone had flipped a switch and erased me from the story. For the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace, but it was the kind of peace that feels borrowed, like someone could take it away if I breathed too loud. Months turned into a year. I moved again, changed my job, started rebuilding piece by piece. Sometimes, I'd still think about Megan, what she said in that video, the fear in her eyes. Part of me wanted to believe she escaped, that she started a new life somewhere. But deep down, I knew. People who cross men like Greg don't get second chances. Then, just last week, I got a small package at my office. No return address, no markings. Inside was a single Polaroid photo, grainy, sun-faded, but unmistakable. It was Megan. She was standing on a beach somewhere, hair longer, smiling at the camera. On the back, in her handwriting, were 2 words: "I survived." I don't know if it's real. I don't know if it's a message or a warning, but I keep it locked in a drawer, and sometimes I take it out just to remind myself of everything that happened, everything I lost and everything I learned. I caught her cheating with her boss, and somehow, that simple betrayal dragged us both into something much darker than love and lies. Now Greg's dead, she's jobless, or maybe not, and I'm left with a truth I'll never fully understand. Because in the end, this wasn't just about infidelity. It was about power, control, and what people are willing to destroy to keep their secrets buried. And if there's one thing I've learned from all of it, it's that some stories don't end. They just go quiet.